Good morning and good afternoon again. This is Ami from Exxat. Thank you for joining us to learn about my request workflow. This is part 7 of 15 for our Exxat Prism training series. Helping me today on this webinar are two of my colleagues, Namit and Sai, who will be our presenters. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. This webinar is recorded and you will receive a copy of the recording 2 hours after the webinar is completed. You will also be able to find the recording of our exact YouTube channel under Exxat Prism Training Series. You will find today's presentation attached in the handout section in the GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to follow along. If you have any questions during the webinar, use the question section to ask questions or comment throughout the presentation. We will be manning the questions and addressing them during our question breaks. If you are having any technical difficulties, please use the chat box and we shall help you out. So without any further ado, over to you, Namit.
Thank you, Emmy, for the quick introduction. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. So today we'll be talking about the My Request workflow. Quick introduction. So I'm the presenter for today's session and my name is Namit Ventikar. I'm working with Exxat as a customer success specialist, right? So to get started with, uh, the agenda for today's session is to cover the following topics, which you currently see on the screen. To start off with is the overview and setup. Then we'll be deep diving into the student view as to how they can access the forms and submit their preferences. Next up will be about the school review. How do they review the forms and create the placements? Once these placements are completed, lastly, we'll see how to place them and publish the placement notifications to the students. All right. So in the very first section that we'll be talking about is the overview and setup. So under this specific section, we will be talking more about how the programs will get this my request form created. How long does it take, or if there is any sort of template for my request forms and what all it includes. So to starting off with, what exactly is my request? So when we talk about my request on Prism platform, it is considered to be one of the placement processes where schools collect the information from students to secure placements. So when we talk about securing placements, we need to have some basic details about the students' information, their preferences, sites and locations, etc. So what are the major components of the My Request layout? So when we talk about My Request, it includes your basic information such as clinical setting name, duration, if it's a part-time or a full-time placement. Then moving on, it will be about the site and the location details which the students will be submitting, right? And then we also gather the placement, the clinicians or the preceptor details and their documents. So this is something which combining all together will be framed as my request. And this is also referred to as self-placement, which students kind of get it for themselves and we create the placement for them on exact system. Moving on, we will see how my request workflow is set up on the exact end. So this is how it would look like. So it's a quick infographic that I would want to talk about. So to start off with, firstly, we have to configure the form in the exact system, post which we'll have to set up this form as one of the wish list or a form which students will be able to access within their logins. Once they submit it, the school has to review. And once the review is completed and the details are verified, the last step is to make a placement, right? So this is the quick workflow of how exactly the my request works on the exact end, right? So moving forward, how do we set up the forms, right? So that is something which comes to your mind when we talk about my request or the custom forms. So when we talk about my request, we need to firstly set up a call with your customer success specialist or your account managers to review your current process, post which we will be helping you with a requirement sheet wherein you'll have to help us with all of the details that will be set up. We will talk through it as and when we proceed with the presentation. All right. So once this particular details are shared with us, it's kind of acknowledged from your end, we start working on it. So currently, if you see, this is some of the sample copies or the layout as to how the my request or self placement details are secured from the student's end with multiple sections and details that you currently see on the screen, right? So this can be few details that exactly is something which you would be requiring to go ahead with their preference and creating the placement. So this is just a example to showcase the layout, which again can vary with every next school, right? So moving into the next slide, we'll be talking about the requirement sheet that I was referring to. So when we talk about setting up this particular form on Exact system, either the CSS, that is the customer success specialist, or the account manager, we will be helping you with this sort of Excel template, wherein it's bifurcated with color coding, as you see, with different sections on this particular Excel template. So it's bifurcated with basic details, location information, preceptor information, and other details such as attestations, or if there is any additional questions that you would want to kind of capture from your students, right? So when we talk about this section or the layout, this is particularly bifurcated with the main section, that is the section header, such as basic, location, or preceptor. And then moving forward, what type of field that would be, or the name that is that it needs to carry, right? So this is something which we'll be discussing when we talk about the Excel template that we'll be sharing with you. All right. Moving forward, let's discuss on type of status that we have to offer by default within this particular my request setup, right? So again, this is bifurcated basis color coding, which you can see on the screen at this very moment. You can choose to change it as per your choice, just in case if you would want to. But then just to let you know, the color codes that are shared here are very much in sync with the other modules of the system, just to keep it consistent and to avoid any sort of confusion, right? So for example, say for the overall status, the current color coding that we offer is yellow. If it needs more information, it can be highlighted in orange, or if it's deleted, it's in red. So that is how the current color coding is set up to, right? Moving forward with the contracts, it has a few color coding associated. Same goes with preceptor and the compliance part as well, right? Next up, moving ahead, let's now discuss how to set up the wish list or my request form within your logins, right? You need to first click on the placement that you see on the quick menu panel on the left hand side, or either you can click on the placement tile under the placement management card on the main screen. Once you click onto this, you will now have to select the course for which the my request needs to be set up, right? So either you can actually search that course name directly in the laundry list that is set up. So all of the course offering that have been set up under the courses module will start showing up in this section. But in case if the list is huge, but then if you're not able to find it right on the screen here, you can always make use of the search bar, right? So you can enter the course number or course name, and that specific course offering will pop up. And accordingly, you can just click on the course name. All right. So course name is clickable. This will take you to the main screen of the placement where you can set up the wish list. Now, how do we set up the wish list is on the top banner of the screen where you see setup slots wish list. Wish list is something which is currently highlighted, right? You need to click on this wish list. So in case if this is a freshly created or a very new course, you'll see no wish list which have been created prior to this. In such cases, you can just click on create wish list. But say if it's one of the cases where you already created the wish list, it might also show up in this way. Okay. Now let's consider this to be a very fresh course that's been created and we are setting up the my request form. So in such cases, you need to click on create wish list. And first and foremost, you need to give it a name. So this wish list name is something which will appear throughout the system. You and your students will be able to see this name. So we usually recommend to associate with course name, number, rotation, term. So it can be a combination of any of these items that I just spoke about. So in case this is not the flow or the verbiage that you currently follow, you can also make sure to use the way you're currently addressing it. You can type in the content in the field of wishlist name. So that will take you to the next page, that is how to set up the different types of dates for this particular wish list. All right. So once you've given the wish list name, right, then we talk about the different types of date that you see here on the screen, that is view date, open date, and close date. All right. So one thing to note here is for every next option of the date that you need to select, you have this date and time picker icon. So once you click onto this, it will allow you to pick the date, and then the time. So when we talk about the time, just to ensure we are informing you, it's a 24-hour clock. So you need to select the correct time and set minutes and gap of 5 minutes. So it cannot be set like, say, for example, 10:16. It either has to be 10:15 or 10:20. So that is how it's set up. Now, what is the difference between view, open, and close date is something which we'll be talking more about, right? So view date is basically a date that is set up for your students wherein they can start seeing all the details which you've set up, all right, which is updated real time even before they start creating their wish list. So this allows your students some additional time to research the available opportunities and take wise decisions. So the view date is a non-actionable kind of a date that you're setting up, but then still they'll be able to see the details. Similarly, we have open date. So open date is the date when students will be allowed to begin selecting their ranking options on this particular wish list, right? Starting on this date, a student can actually save their work and return later or submit if the work list has been or the wish list has been completed, right? And lastly is the close date. So this date is like a due date for them to complete before the date whatever is set up in this particular window, right? So once it passes the due date, they will not be able to submit the wish list. But then if they have worked on anything and if it is saved as draft or if it's in progress, administrator can just see the details as to what they've done so far. All right. So once this is set up, next point to note here is you'll have to click on the radio button which says set up my request wish list, right? So once you've done this basic details, you've configured them, click on next, and that will take you to the next step, that is wish list type. So in the next step, first and foremost that we need to do is to select the form. By default, there is no form which comes in handy with the system. This is something which has to be custom built for every next school. So this needs to be informed beforehand for us if in case if you plan to make use of this wish list as one of the functionalities or the options to secure or to understand your students' preference, right? So this is something which is ideally important for you to let us know beforehand. So whatever forms that have been configured and housed for your account will be populating in this drop down. If you have one or more forms, that will also show up in the same section, right? So once you've selected the form, next up, you'll have to select the rotation. All right. So this rotation is again set up at the coursework at the course level. So you can again check that whenever you're trying to set this up. So this again will be visible on the very first section when we clicked on the placements, right? So you can always set up the rotations under the same course. All right. Then moving on, we have the minimum and maximum allowed threshold. So basically minimum is something which is mandatory. So that is to be set up by the administrator where students have to at least submit this many number of requests and it's a mandatory field. However, maximum allowed is something which is completely optional, but still you can keep that maximum cap by entering some number, due to which students will be restricted and they'll not be able to submit multiple requests unnecessarily. So you can block it somewhere, say, for example, you want a student to give it a higher cap or upper cap of 3 or 5 maximum allowed. In such cases, just enter that number as 5 and they will be able to submit 5 different preferences of their choice for this particular placement, right? Lastly, we have the instruction for students. So the text entered here will be visible to students, right? So whenever they are trying to access this particular form or start working on this wish list, they can always access to this particular instructions or guidelines that you've added in here, and that will be visible at the students end, right? So once you've added all of these details, just click on next, and that will take you to the third step where you'll have to now select the students, right? So all the students who have been registered for this particular course will start showing up in this section in this grid format that you currently see here with email status and other details, right? So one way to note here is you can always choose to select all by clicking onto this particular check mark or the checkbox that you see here, which will select all of the students listed in this particular course or registered for this particular course. But if you would want to just pick a couple of them, you can always multi-select by clicking whatever name is applicable. Okay. And other thing to note in here is you also have a automatically update student selection when course registration is updated checkbox. So this is going to help you in case if you have any new registration done to the particular course, or if the registration has been updated. In such cases, if you just check mark this particular option, it will automatically start registering all of those students, and they'll be able to access the wish list that you've created. When I say wish list, is the my request that we're referring to. Okay, so the benefit of clicking onto this particular line that you see here, which states automatically update student selection, is to save your manual efforts to coming back to this section and again check marking that new student and publishing it to that specific student only. So that saves on to your manual efforts. So that's the only point if you would want to just click on automatically select. All right. So moving next is the very important part of setting up this particular my request. So it's about the notification part, right? So the first section that we see in here is to notify students on the very first basic steps. That will be to notify them when the my request opens, that is backed or interlinked by the open date that you're setting up. Then to notify them 24 hours before the closures, that is your due date or the close date. And to notify them whenever the my request wish list or the form has been disabled or has crossed the due date. Okay, so this is something which you can select. Our ideal recommendation is to always keep all of these three basic notification enabled, so they are updated and stay connected with whatever dates or time ranges that you're setting up for this particular form, right? So moving into the next bit is to notify your students. When we talk about notifying your students, it is bifurcated by different sections that you see here. So first and foremost is the overall. So overall, when we talk about overall, is like the overall progress of their entire form. So example, say if it's under review, if it needs more information, or if the request is not approved, and so on, right? So when you click onto that particular drop down, it gives you more options, and you can multi-select which option you would want to set for the overall. Similarly applies for compliance, preceptor, and location. Okay, a few examples or the best setup that we've seen so far from what we have helped our clients is, if you're setting it up for compliance, for example, say if the status is approved, if it's a pending compliance, if it's not approved, or if you need more information. So this is something which actually comes in handy, and they get notified if there is any important communication that needs to be passed on. So this helps you reduce your manual interaction with them, and this will notify them directly to their inboxes. Okay, then moving into the next bit is to notify school. All right, when you're trying to notify any of your course faculties, right, so you can choose to notify them with different options. When we talk about, let me take you back to that section again, just a quick minute. Okay, so when we talk about notifying the school, all right, so again you can choose to set up all of the course faculties who've been set up. You can just enable that name. If not, you can always choose the additional recipient option, and you can type in the email, so even they receive this particular notification. All right, so that is something which is applicable for your comments, but let me take you back to this section. So when we talk about notifying school, so that is something where you have different status again, like the overall compliance, preceptor, and location. So any of the changes or any of the updates done to that particular form, they get notified, right? Similarly, if there is any comments added, okay, so you can also notify them to the comment section. So you have additional recipient for the notify school as well as the comments. So you can choose to add those details as per your requirement. Okay, so once we have set up all of these details, we'll quickly see a couple of quick references of to how a sample email template would look like, right? So in case if one of the email states that the status has changed to contract approved, how would that actually look like? So it contains the generic template which has all of the basic details of the placement, and it gives you the updated status. In this case, if it's location contract status changed to contract approved. So this is something which is notified to uh, the end users whenever there is any updates done. All right. So the last step of setting up my request is the fifth step, that is summary. So this is going to be like a summary or an overview. So you can review all of the configuration and setting that you've done in the last four steps. If you think something is not in line with your requirements, you can choose to click on the back button. It will take you back to the previous sections, you can make those changes and review it again and just click on update. So that's going to save the my request form that you currently set up for this course. Once you set this up, it populates on the same screen under wish list with the open tag. So this again depends basis on what open date and time that you're setting up, right? So if it's a due date past wish list, it will carry a close tag. If it's something which is open currently, it will have this open tag or status associated to it. Okay. Uh, a quick point that I would want to add in here is on the very same page, if you see there is a recent enhancement that we've done. So this is going to really help you. So you can anytime preview the form which was already there, but delete functionality is something which we've enhanced recently. So in case if you would think this was set up incorrectly, if you would want to go ahead and delete it, or if you no longer want to keep it in your entire laundry list, you can just click on the delete icon and that will allow you to remove that particular form that has been set up, right? Great. So this is something which falls under setting up the my request form. But before we go there, let's check if we have any questions.
Yes, we do have one question. Can you duplicate the form from year to year, or you have to recreate this every year or semester?
So ideally, the form that we are creating will be housed in your account. So you can use it for every next course offering that you're creating. So you need not duplicate the same form setup again, but you can reuse the same form. It will be already part of your system. Just has to be created with the new course offering that you're creating.
So, can you clarify if it just needs to be activated for that another
Correct.
course that you are setting
Correct.
up?
So the new course offering that you're creating, so you'll have to set it up under the placements, just the same steps that we follow. No need to create a new form until and unless if there are any additional details or the form has changed.
Okay, thank you, Namit. I don't see any other
I think
questions.
there was one more question at the beginning. How is this impacted by the agreements or contracts already in the system? That is to say, do we need to have established contracts in order for a student to use this? So you don't need to have an established contract in the system for students to use it. The students can still use it if there is no contract in the system, because all that students will be doing is entering the information about the clinical site, and then post that you will decide whether you want to place a student at that clinical site or not. So I think Namit will be covering this process in
Yes.
his next upcoming slides. So to answer your question, you can use it for both existing and new contracts as well. This does not have anything to do with your contracts in the system.
Perfect. Thank you so much for answering that, Amy and Sai. So let's proceed with the next session outline, that is students view. So in this particular section of the student view, we'll currently be discussing as to how they can complete the form that has been set up for them, how they need to fill it up and submit it for review. All right. So moving into the next slide. So whenever a student logs in, this is the landing page or the UI or the dashboard that they get to see. All right. So they need to click on the coursework that you see on this particular screen. So once you click on the coursework, you'll be directed to this particular page where you can see what course it is associated for. You can click on the course name, post which you'll have to access it under course activities. So under course activities, all the forms that have been published will be listed in here. In this case, it was a my request. So you can see that name. This particular section will carry very basic details such as the wish list name that we spoke about, which is something which school and students both can see. This is the threshold that you've set up with the minimum and maximum number allowed of the request that they can submit. And in order to create or to start working on to this particular my request, they need to click on add request, which is on the right hand side of the screen. All right. So moving into the next slide. So once they click on to add request, this is how it would actually appear at the student's end. It is bifurcated basis multiple sections that you see on the screen, such as basic, location, preceptor information. Then comes in your additional details, preceptor details, self-placement, attestations, and so on, right? So all of the sections have a tiny drop down that you see towards the right hand side, and it opens up to that specific section. And while we were setting up the my request, we also discussed about the instructions. The students can always click on view instructions to see what all guidelines or notifications or say stepwise process that they need to follow have been added into this section. So this comes in really handy for students if they're doing it for the first time or if they need any additional information. All right. So this is something which comes in on this particular page. And a few notable points before we start discussing anything further. You have a few points on, okay, sorry, my bad. You have three options towards this section where you see clear all. So this is something which comes in handy if they want to start this particular form from the scratch, if they want to clear or wipe off all of the details that they've filled so far and start afresh. That comes in real handy. Save is specifically to say if they've started working on it but they are not able to submit it in one go, they can always save it as a draft. So that is when save button will come in handy. And submit, self-explanatory, is something to submit once everything has been filled up, right? So let's move into the next slide. So let's talk about a few sections that we discussed in the previous slide. In this section, say for example, basic information. What do we capture under that is, in this case would be specialty, that is the clinical setting. In this case, if example, internal medicine, what is the number of duration in hours that they need to complete if it's a partial or a full-time placement, right? So that is something which they need to add in here. Similarly goes to the location information. So anything that you see on this particular page with the star asterisk marked in red is something which is compulsory, without which they will not be able to proceed further. They have to have this details added. So you get at least those bare minimum details which is required at the administrator or the school end to review or verify the details. All right. So once they have added all of these basic details, so they can proceed with completing this particular form, right? When we talk similarly goes with the preceptor information, any other details, right? And if there is any attestation, you just need to click on I agree. And lastly, there is a site document which, in case if it's required by the school, they can always upload that using this functionality. Any attachment that you're adding in this particular system, it is backed by all of those supported format extensions that are listed out here in the description. And the maximum size the system allows would be 10 MB. So that's something to be noted. And this is already as part of the regular flow that you see on the system, but just to let you know, this is how it works, right? Then moving in, if in case they would want to add any details or information in form of comments, right? So that can also be managed on the same screen. They can click on to this plus add comments, and that is how it would show up. In case if it's the latest comment, it'll show up in this format. If you want to view all of the other comments, you can click on view all comments. Okay, so that's how you can make use of the comment section as well. All right. So now once you have saved all of your details that were part of this multiple sections within this my request forms, right? So you can actually click on the submit button, which is like the last step. Of course, we've discussed about the clear all and save, so that comes in real handy. But then submit is like the final step. So once they submit this, they will not be able to make any changes. All right. So whenever they submit the form, it will carry a submitted tag within their login under the coursework activities, and they should be able to see all the details moving forward as and when the school will start making progress or start working on their forms, right? So in most of cases, the status that might change are of the formats wherein it would be placement confirmed whenever the school has completed its review and secured a clinical placement for the student. Say the other way would be if the request is not approved. In cases where the details are not correct, if the contracts are not in place, if the preceptor details are not right. So in such cases, if a few of the placement that gets rejected, so that will also carry a tag as request not approved. And in case partial details are correct, but there is any additional information required, you can also mark it as need more information. All right, perfect. So let's quickly take a pause to check if we have any questions for the student view.
Yeah, there is a question. Can students submit multiple forms?
Yes, they can certainly submit multiple forms, but again, that depends on the threshold that the administrators have set up with the minimum and maximum allowed.
Thank you, Namit. I don't see any other questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amy, for confirming that. All right. So moving further, we will be talking about the school review functionality. So this is something which comes in picture when the students have now submitted the form. Now it's at the school end where they have to now review this particular details the students are submitting, right? So basically in this section, majorly we'll be talking about linking the location details, preceptor details, checking the contracts, or adding any comments if in case of any additional information is required, right? So something of those sort which is actually important for all of the administrator to understand and to learn is something which we'll be covering now, right? Moving into the next slide. So to understand how you now review it as an administrator, right? So now let's deep dive to understand how the review needs to be done, right? So once the students have submitted the my request form, you can start reviewing the information and create the placement. In order to create this placement, what needs to be done is you have to click on process my request, which is on the left hand side, which can be accessed from the quick menu panel, or you can directly click on to my process my request under the placement management card, which is on the screen itself, right? So there are two ways to access the same section. Once you click on to process my request, you will be next you will be taken into a dashboard where you can view request for upcoming and current rotations, right? So in this particular the next page that we'll be going into, right, you'll be able to see the overall status, preceptor details, faculties, compliances, etc. So let's go into that section. So once you click on process my request, this is the dashboard view where you get to see the graphical representation with different formats or different sections that have been set up. So all the data that is visible on the dashboard is something which is clickable and takes you to the all request section with that specific filter applied. All right. So that is something which you can always refer to. But talking more about the details that we see here is again increase with the number of requests that you start receiving. Initially, if you have no request or no submissions done from the students, this page would be blank. All right. So just to make a note of it. Then moving into the next step, say in case if you want to review all of the requests that the students have submitted. So in such cases, you can switch it to the all request tab. And within this section, you have two options. You can view the details basis upcoming and current rotation or the past rotation for your historic data, right? So that is something which you can always choose from this section. Then on this particular page, all you get to see is the student name, the course they've registered for, and the status for multiple components of this my request. In this case, say if contract, if it's approved, if compliance is approved, preceptor, so all of the status will show up on this screen. Okay, so this is something which you can always uh, see on this particular dashboard. In case if you would now want to access one of the forms that have been submitted, you have two ways to access it. So under the actions column, if you click on view, right, so that's going to open up the form on the very same page. But if you see there is another option towards the right hand side, it's like a pop out window, so that will open the same form in the new tab. So the benefit of this is in case if you've applied a couple of filters, so that will stay as is, but you can always access that form in a different tab and start working on it. And whenever you want, you can access multiple students with the filters applied on the same screen that we are on, right? So say in this case, now when we click on to the view, so this is how the form would load at the administrator end once the students have submitted, right? So for example, the sections that we spoke about, right? So basic, location, preceptor, etc. So this is something students have filled up. So you can now start working onto this particular form. First and foremost starts with the basic information. You can click on view compliance to see what all compliance they have to upload or submit the details. What is the current status? If there is anything pending, it will always carry a status of some action needed. Or say if it's approved, there are multiple status again within this particular section. In case if something is not approved, and the reason is a mandatory field for the administrator to always associate. In case say in this case for COVID-19 vaccination, the lot number was missing, example, right? So that is how they can easily identify and they can see the details. All right, moving on to the next bit. is the location. That is very important. So the students are going to submit the site and location details, which you need to associate either with the existing site or location which is already part of your database. If it's not the case, you can always create a new site and location and associate them. Let's talk about how to do that, right? So once you click onto this search location, a new drawer will open up, right? And it will start looking up for the details. So the name that the student has submitted, it will automatically pull up in this particular fields or the placeholders that you see here, right? Once you click on to search, it will give you a very relative or a nearby option for the details that have been submitted in terms of name, city, zip, etc. So if the data matches, you can just click on the radio button, or you can always make use of advanced search. And if you have that particular site or location within the system, you can just select it and proceed with associating it. All right. Once you associate it, it will carry this linking tag that you see here. So in this case, say for this particular form, you've linked Edina, then you can see there are two options now which populates. Previously it was search location. Now it says view contract and update location. Correct. So when we talk about view contract, is something is again part of you to take care before even you create that placement. So you can just check the contract. If in case if the contract is something which is already in place, you can always update that status from the drop downs. All right. Moving into the next bit, that is the preceptor information. So again, this is the details that the students are filling in the form and submitting, but then you need to associate it as a preceptor or a site, I mean, like whoever will be guiding them throughout that particular uh, clinical or the placement. Okay. So even in this case for the preceptor information, the current button that you see here states is search clinical instructor, right? Once you click onto this, it will open up to a new drawer, right? And the system will start loading all of the personals who are already added in the system. You can always pick it from the list, whoever is associated for the location selected. If that's not the case, if the name is completely new, you can always add a new preceptor. Okay. So that is something which comes in really handy. Once you have added the basic details, and if you click on save, that will associate the preceptor for this particular placement and this particular form the student has submitted. Okay. So once all of this is taken care of, you will have to now just check. All right, in case if there is any update to the preceptor, you can click on the update preceptor tile that you see on the screen. That will take you to this page where you can update the details from the list. All right. And I would also want to talk more about the map documents, which is like a recent enhancement that we've come up with. All right. So in case, say, if there is any document mapping that needs to be done, so that can be done in the next section of map documents. Okay. So once the preceptor is linked, right? So you can always make use of this section to upload preceptor information to different sections of the system which automatically gets populated. Say in this case, if it's a preceptor information which needs to be mapped to CV, if there is a preceptor information agreement that needs to be added as a licensure or site document under document, so that is something which you can associate and you can automatically map it against that particular uh, preceptor whoever is being added into the system. Okay, so you need not have to go back and add them manually. So that is something which you can always do. So this particular default section of each of the documents will be shown in this particular section, comes in by default while we are configuring the form. But in case if you would want to make changes to the default sections, you can always let us know, right? So whenever we are configuring the form moving forward, we will always get this information collected from the clients or the to understand as to if there are any documents that needs to be automatically mapped to the preceptors, which section that should be under. If that's not the case, you can always let us know where that needs to be added within this four options that you see on the screen. Okay, so whenever you map this particular documents, this will automatically be uploaded to the preceptor with a profile note stating that it was captured from the my request form. Okay, so that is something which is a recent enhancement and that comes in really handy. All right. So moving into the next bit is the comment section. So in case if you would want to add any comments to this particular form while you're working on it, you can always make use of that plus icon on the screen. So once you click onto the plus icon, it will give you a text box where you can always add the information, and you can choose to share it with students as well by check marking the box that you see just below the description text box, right? So once you have check mark share with students, just click on save, and that will add to the log of that particular comment, right? So once this is done, let's now talk about the uh, responses, right? So like I mentioned initially, whenever the students has I have submitted this form, this kind of gets locked and they will not be able to make any changes, let that be even minor changes here and there. In such cases, you as an administrator always have this edit student response functionality within this page. You just need to click onto it just in case if there are any corrections required, if there is any additional detail to be added. The student is reaching out to you after this form has been submitted. Such cases can be taken care of under the edit student response, and this can be performed exclusively with the administrator logins only, right? So once you have edited the student response with any of those details that you see on the screen, just hit on the save and close button, and that should be it. You will get all of those details within that section, right? And moreover, talking about one more additional feature that I would want to discuss in here is the recent announcement about the faculty login as well. So we've come up with the process my request style for the faculty logins as well. So this is something which is a on-demand feature. So if you need access to this feature, you can let us know with the requirement either by raising a ticket, or you can directly reach out to your account managers or customer success specialists. So we can get that activated for you. All right. So that's more about the faculty login enhancement. So let's take a quick pause to see if we have any questions before we proceed further.
Yes, we did have one question.
Mhm.
Is the term preceptor customizable on the forms that you see?
On the form.
Yeah, I mean on the my request process. So
Yeah, it is.
answer to
Yes.
that. Yeah, sign. Go ahead.
So it is customizable. The terminology can be done based on the program type. So that's completely customizable. And also, I see another question. Do students get notified when a comment is made? Yes. If the notifications are set up on the administrative side while setting up the wish list, the students do get notified when a comment is made.
Perfect. Thank
And
you, Sai. Yes.
we just had one more question come in. What
Mhm.
happens if you don't associate the location or the preceptor?
So ideally, whenever the form is coming in, right? So you are creating this placement within this section itself. So without associating a student to a location where they'll be actually going out for their clinicals, the system will not allow you to create a placement. So that's a very valid and important information to be associated with any of the placements that are being done, because placements are directly linked with the locations. Location is like the patient care or the site where the students are actually going out for the clinicals. All right? Does that answer the question?
Um, yes, I think so. Yeah, yeah, we can
Perfect.
move ahead. Yep.
All right. Thank you, Amy, for the confirmation. All right. So within this particular section of reviewing the My Request form as an administrator, we have a few additional activities while you're reviewing, such as move request. All right. So in order to move a request, say there are a few dependencies associated. So if you would want to move this, it has to be moved from one rotation to another. Uh, so we'll just talk about it. So on this particular section, right, when you see on this screen, there is three dots on the extreme right top corner with the move request option. So this needs to be done in cases where, say, the submission that the student has initially done has now, I mean, like, has to be now moved to another rotation for some reason. Say if there is change in cycle, change in some other details. In such cases, you can always move the rotation, but the dependencies here would be you can only move the request if that my request form is being used by uh, in the other course as well. It has to be the same my request form, right? Other than that, it should be also enabled for the particular rotation where you are moving it to. So it has to be created beforehand. Okay. So that is the dependencies or prerequisites whenever you are moving the whenever you are moving this particular request. Okay. So that is something about move request. Then the next point is on this page where you click on move request, you get to see those informations that is valid and important for you to make a note of even before you move student from one placement to another. So in such cases, this is going to be, like I said, this will be for the same form configured as that of the current one. That will be the ones only will be showing up in the list to move this particular request. Okay. In case if you don't find those options under this list, you'll have to check if it is already set up for that specific course rotation or if the wish list has been created or not, right? In such cases, you'll have to create it and again come back to this section to move that request. Okay, so that's about moving the request within this section. Once, or say if everything is in here and if you just want to move, you can just click on, you can just select the radio button and click on move. That will take you to the next section. Lastly is the deleting my request. If in case one of the forms is no longer valid, if the students drops out, or you as an administrator can always delete this particular form or request. Okay, and again, this is accessible from the right top corner just below the move request option, that is delete. Okay, so that is the delete functionality. When you click on delete, the system will pop up a new box wherein you can just select if you want to proceed with delete or you want to cancel that request. Okay, perfect. So next up is to place the students and publish the notifications. All right, so how do we now place the students once you have verified all of the details that you see on the screen? Okay, so all you need to do is you just need to click on to that section where you see the details or the status of all of the different sections where you verified the details. Once everything is in place, click on create placement. Okay, a new drawer opens up where you can see all the details with the current request, right? So you'll have to ensure that all the details are in here with the correct course offering, correct rotations being selected. All right, everything verified, just click on next and that will take you to the page where you'll have to mandatorily select a setting. Okay, a clinical setting that needs to be assigned for this placement. All right, once that is done, recheck the clinical instructor or the preceptor associated for this placement, click on place. So that will create a placement for the particular student that the form has been reviewed for, right? And let's quickly check how the status change email notification goes out, right? So in this case, the overall status has now changed to placement confirmed. So this is how the email would go out, right? So that is something which is a part of creating the placement. But then what comes in now is something which is more about the publishing placement. So publish placement is very important because without publishing the placement, you will not be able to notify your students, right? So in order to publish the placement, you can access the uh, publish email and publish functionality under placement module. So that's again accessible from the quick menu panel from the left hand side or under the placement management card placement tile on the main screen. So once you click onto this, it will take you to a page where you can check the course number. If it's already visible on the screen, just click on that name, or you can always make use of the search bar or placement groups for that matter and click onto that course name. It will take you to the same page where we set up the wish list, right? So in this section, what we need to do is we'll have to select the email and publish tile on top, all right, within that particular grid that you see up top. Okay, you'll have to now select the rotation which is applicable where you need to publish this particular placement. Then select the student to whom you would want to notify. All right, so once you select the student, the options that you see towards the right hand side such as placement publish, compose email and email dashboard will highlight. Okay, so publishing placement will allow you to notify your students in a way where It will be visible to them only if they log into their system and see the details. Okay, so that is publishing the placement. But if you want to notify them via email, you can always click on compose email and send out an email notification. All right, so that's more about the placement notifications. So whenever you publish the placement, the system will have the latest status, which is mentioned in the last column under latest, which says published placement on Feb 20th, example, right? So that is something which comes in handy for you to view the details. So in case if you published a placement by mistake, right, you can always choose to unpublish it. Just select the uh, name of the student, all right, click on the three dots and click on unpublish. So that will actually unpublish the placement that was not supposed to be published. Okay, so that is something which will help you in case if there has been any wrong placement published that has been done. All right, so that's more about the flow that we had to cover today for the my request. So we can just check if we have any questions, Amy, so we can proceed further.
Um, I'm reviewing the question box. I don't see any questions.
Perfect. So I think we've covered pretty much it that falls under the workflow of my request. So we are good here, and I would thank every one of you, whoever has joined the session. So we appreciate your valuable time, and I hope you found this webinar informative, right? But before we close, I had a quick update. So the links that you see here is something which is clickable. So all of the discussion that we had or the presentation that I did today, you will be able to find those help documents on our website. So you'll be able to find the help articles which is already published. Let that be processing, setting up your my request or processing my request. You can always click onto this articles and see the infographics with the description and screenshots for your reference. Right? More to it, I just wanted to let you know also about our upcoming webinar that is scheduled on March 7th, and it is basically focused on the wish list and placement part of the system. All right, so that's about it from my side. Thank you so much, everyone.